Hello, and thank you, as always, for joining us in the locker room. You have picked a very exciting day to be here. We've got a very, very special episode of the locker room. I just made that up. It's just going to be a regular episode. But don't turn out. It's going to be a good episode.
On pins and needles.
You can't wait.
I can't
Pastor
wait.
Jim Locke, Senior Pastor, Hillcrest Baptist Church. We have named the locker room in his honor. My name is Jim Carmack, and again, we are always excited to talk to you. If you haven't been joining us, where you been? We've been waiting for you. No, we are working through a series in the book of Revelation, mainly the letters to the 7 churches, and we are wrapping that up today. So it is a special episode. We're going to kind of bring that one to a close, but really good overall.
8 weeks in, man.
It's just
2 months.
We just talked about it. We were just talking about doing it the first of the year, and here we are.
I'm telling you, we've already remarked in recent podcast at the pace of life, and I don't know what it is about 2026, dude. I'm serious. The calendar is just flipping by,
Yeah.
and this week is going to be just a blur. Because it's Holy Week, it's Easter week, we've got something going on every day.
Yeah.
Meetings are still in process, and I just had a meeting with our 2 worship pastors at Hillcrest reviewing our orders of worship for Friday night and for Sunday. And still a couple of things that need to be buttoned down, but basically we're ready. I think for that, and the messages for both Friday and Sunday. These first drafts are done, first passes, but we wanted to keep both services succinct and fairly brief. So a little bit of room still to edit down. I read a book last year.
You read a lot of books. Just for the record, you read a lot of books.
I read a lot of books.
Okay.
But here's the thing. I don't fish. I don't hunt.
No, it's a good thing.
I don't really run anymore.
That's not criticizing.
I've turned all the running over to Kimsel.
Just try to keep up with you. It's like,
but man. I do read a lot of books, and I've got a lot that I haven't read that I want to read. But anyway, I read a book last year on writing, the craft of writing.
Okay.
And the title of the book was Murder Your Darlings.
Yeah.
Murder Your Darlings. And it was really a good book. I enjoyed it. I remember I took it with me. I forget where I was going, but I remember reading quite a bit of it on the 2 airline flights that I had. And but it's a book about, obviously about writing, but it's about brevity and the importance of brevity. And several chapters on the art of editing, and just when you think you've edited it as far down, edit some more. And so a lot of us are still trying to learn the lessons of brevity, but that was a very good read. But we want these services, Good Friday and Easter, to be relatively brief services because of the number of people, turnover that we need to maintain, both in the house and in the parking lot, and then just guests who the last thing in the world they want is for a preacher to drone on, and so working to keep things brief, but we're about ready, I think, and so it's going to be a great weekend.
Good. In that spirit, we're going to be brief. Thank you for joining us on the locker room. We'll see you next week.
Right.
No,
we make exceptions for the podcast.
Good. I did want to ask you though. We haven't traditionally done a Good Friday service before. Actually, I have a good friend of mine who attends a Catholic church down South Florida, and he was kind of mentioning. I said, "This is our first." We were chatting. I said, "This is our first time doing it here at Hillcrest," and he was just kind of surprised. Like, why wouldn't you do a Good Friday service? Why haven't we traditionally done one, or what's kind of the thinking behind doing one now versus not before?
I don't know that there's a real reason as to why we haven't. I mean, you predate me a little bit at Hillcrest. You don't remember?
I don't ever remember one here. No, back to the early 2000s. No.
There's no real reason why. We have. I know other churches do a Good Friday service. We for whatever reason never have. Maybe it's just because of how busy we normally are on the weekend. But we've talked about doing either that or a Maundy Thursday service for a long time. The Spanish Trail congregation decided last year that they wanted to pass at the Maundy Thursday service. And I thought, well, this would be a good trial run. And so I went over there just as a participant. In fact, I told Dan, I said, I'm going to come to the Thursday night service, but I don't want to have to do anything. I just want to be a worshiper.
Yeah.
And I really found that refreshing. And so,
because you don't get a chance to do that much.
Not very often.
As a preacher, you're
not very
pretty
often.
much busy on Sundays.
And so we decided that this year we were going to try a Good Friday service and kind of, not have something every day of what's often referred to as Holy Week, but have something that involved much of the week, giving our people opportunities to experience the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus in a variety of different ways. And so we decided to add the Good Friday flavor. We're going to, and I think it'll be a sweet service. We'll evaluate. We have no idea what to expect.
Yeah.
So I don't know if there's going to be 50 people, 500, or 1,500. We have no idea. So we'll be prepared. We'll take communion, and then we'll evaluate. We can't do anything more on Easter Sunday morning than what we are doing now with the 3 services. And it's what we have done for the past many years. We did 2 morning services on Easter for a while, and then we added the 3rd a few years ago. We obviously can't do 4 morning services on Easter. It just would be too much. And so the only other thing we can do to make more space for Easter available is to do a Saturday night service that would be the same service, mostly the same anyway, in terms of what we did Sunday morning. So if we did a Saturday night Easter service in the future, which I'm not saying we are and I'm not saying we won't.
You heard it here first.
But if we did that, we might have to rethink the Good Friday service.
Yeah.
Life's about choices, so we would have some choices to make for sure, but we certainly don't want to be in a position where we have to say, we've done everything we can do on Easter, and this is just the way it's got to be.
Yeah.
If we feel like that we can accommodate more worshipers on Easter, and by being creative, we want to try to do that.
For sure.
Yeah, but we'll make those decisions as we go forward.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I'm excited for the Good Friday service.
I am too.
And a Monday, Thursday, but just, to see how this one goes, being the first one. I think we'll have a good crowd, and I think people will be excited to gather to worship, too.
I think so, too.
Looking forward to that.
So that's a 6 o'clock service on Friday, 6 p.m., and come a little bit early, just to be sure.
Bit of a different tone, I'm assuming, in that service.
Yeah, we were talking about that today. I think when our worshipers arrive, and I think it's a good time to talk about it for those maybe that will be watching the podcast between now and then. When you arrive, the room will be a little darker. It won't be dark,
right?
But it won't be blazing.
Oh, that'll be fun. Let's do it. Let's do an all total dark service. We'll usher you to your seats with a flashlight.
But it'll be a little darker in the room. It'll be quieter in the room. And then one of the things we're going to ask our people to do is when it comes time for us to do the benediction at the very end, we're going to ask our people to exit the worship center in complete silence.
Yeah.
It just doesn't seem right when you're in a service that basically is focusing on the death of Christ and the burial of Christ.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem right to then pop the house lights back up, put some
Play some
music in the background, and for people to start backslapping and start talking about March Madness. So we're going to encourage our people to leave quietly, reverently, silently. Not going to tell people not to talk, but do your fellowshipping in the parking lot as you leave. And it won't be totally silent because there'll be kids there, I'm sure, but you get the idea.
Yeah.
So a little more somber tone, which basically sets the stage for a more exciting Resurrection Sunday, which is jubilant and exuberant.
Absolutely.
And we want it to be that way. So 2 completely different approaches and 2 completely different styles. We'll do the Lord's Supper a little bit differently as well.
Okay.
We're going to do a come forward and get it Lord's Supper, which we don't often do. And our church is large. It's hard to do that in a large church without devoting a large amount of time so that people can kind of be leisurely about it. And we've done it before. and there are choke points and log jams, and it's hard. And then you got a balcony to deal with. We are going to close the balcony off to start that service. Okay. And so because we don't know what attendance will be like, we're going to start by directing people to the main floor.
Together. Yeah.
And once, if we feel the need is there, then we'll open up the balconies and allow people to go upstairs at some point before we begin the service. But we're going to see if we can get everybody on the main floor. That will help with the different approach as it relates to the Lord's Supper.
Good.
But it's going to be great. Encourage everybody to come.
Yeah, come. Bring your family, bring your friends. Invite to this, invite to Sunday as well. But yeah, looking forward to
Not doing childcare,
to a big weekend.
But it's like Christmas Eve.
Yeah.
So bring your kids. It's going to be just fine.
In the house. Mm-hmm. Beautiful. All right, let's talk Revelation. We got to wrap this up. The church at Laodicea.
By the way, somebody sent me a something they pulled off the internet where a guy was saying, "Hey, I was at Chick-fil-A today, and my sandwich was a lukewarm sandwich," and he said it made me feel like I was at Chick-fil-A Odyssea.
I know you're tickled because you sent that to me, and then you posted it.
I have to say, our dear friend Megan Woodham was the one that sent it to me, our kids ministry director. And I could hear her hee-hawing when she sent it to me. And I thought, okay, that's perfect. And you were one of the ones I forwarded
so good.
it to. Yeah.
That's funny.
But yes, we talked about Laodicea, difficult church, in a great town. In a great city, but it's the one church that the Lord just nothing to praise.
What's
nothing on His mind to praise at the time.
Is there a significance in the name of the church or the title or anything that you draw from that?
You ask me that a lot. And
I'm sorry,
I mentioned I meant to go and look at the context of the name, and I didn't do it, so I can't answer the question. Okay. But we can circle back around in an upcoming episode if we need to. I don't know that. I do know they pronounce it differently there. Our Turkish guide, when we were there last September, kept referring to it as with a hard C, Laodicea.
Oh, okay.
We're going to Laodicea tomorrow morning, and we can't wait. And but I'm not sure what the derivation of the name is.
Okay. I'm not either.
It was an important city for manufacturing, banking. There was a medical school there. And, all of that comes into play because of so many of the images that Jesus used. He calls them naked, You strut around your fashionable garments. Well, they produced a high-quality wool there that wasn't cashmere, but it would be the equivalent of our cashmere. Very high-end, cost a lot of money.
Expensive, yeah.
Glossy, very soft to the touch. And so that's kind of a play on words. You think you've got everything figured out, and the reality is you're blind. Well, you got to keep in mind the fact that this was an area that produced a very popular balm or salve that was used for eye diseases.
Wow, okay.
It was made with locally grown, a powder produced from a locally grown plant mixed with a certain kind of oil, and it was thought to have healing properties for various kinds of eye remedies. Well, that's a play on words. Jesus accuses them of being blind. Your eye salve is not doing you any good in terms of your spiritual ability to see. And then, of course, he calls them poor, which is the exact opposite from, I believe it was the church at Smyrna, where he tells them, I know your poverty, and yet you're rich.
Yeah.
Well, when he gets to Laodicea, he flips that on its head. You think you're rich, and the reality is you're just dirt poor. Speaking from a spiritual standpoint, here you are in this great banking center of the ancient Near East, Asia Minor. Your manufacturing district produces tremendous income. You're at a perfect location as far as the trade routes are concerned. A lot of business done in this town, and yet the reality is in your wealth, you've completely lost sight of the Lord. And you're poor, and so that's a concern for the Western church. because the Western church,
Very
the
much
church
so.
in America is very wealthy. Lots of resources.
Yeah.
We live in a country, the richest country in the history of the world. And it's not difficult to see how easy it would be to lose sight of your spiritual need when you have everything at your disposal. Doctors, food, entertainment, personal friends, family, resources,
Everything
savings
on
account,
demand.
retirement
Yeah.
account, everything on demand. And it's easy to develop a haughty, independent sense of self-sufficiency where you become kind of a 911 Christian. You dial God up when you need him
Yeah.
or when there's an emergency situation. Other than that, everything's under control. Now, I told more than one person, because I had a number of people come up to me after church at both the services and comment on the service, not in a negative way, but just saying, man, you had me in the crosshairs today. Or, boy, you just walked all over me today.
Yeah.
Or, man, it was a good sermon, Pastor, but, man, it was tough. And they said that from the sense of, I needed to hear
Convicted,
it.
yeah. Well, that's Jesus talking. And I'm always struck by when you put those together. I mean, I feel like some of the other churches, he gives a rebuke, or some correction is needed. He makes a statement or says something. But when you get to this one, as you just mentioned, you are naked, blind, wretched, poor. Like it's just like hit after hit after hit after hit, almost to be like wake up, which is one of the themes we've talked about this. But like, almost like the hits keep coming when I read it. It compounds on itself. And I don't know, like you said, their intentionality behind the words that are playing, but is it, I need you to hear what I'm saying, because I feel like if I just called you naked, you'd say, I'll go put on clothes. If I just called you poor, you just run to the bank. But when I say everything about this, how bad off you are, hopefully you're going to get it and pay attention to it. And I think that's what, I'm convicted every time I hear it too, just because I think it is easy for us to kind of walk in this comfortability, maybe, that we know what we have, we're grateful for what we have, but also like, am I thinking I am too rich? Am I thinking I do have everything I need and have it covered? So whenever I hear that whole row of the criticisms, it's cutting.
We have to, the thing that distinguishes American Christianity generally, and I'm speaking in general terms, from Christianity in other places, that we have to be very intentional that we encourage this sense of constant dependability on the Lord. In other places of the world where poverty is more of a thing and where there are less conveniences and the like, you don't have to encourage dependency. It's built in.
You are.
You just are.
You are.
If it's going to happen, God's going to have to show up. If we're going to have food to put on our table for the next couple of days, God's going to have to do it, because there's no money left in the purse. So there are places where, and it's interesting, I think the places where the church is strongest today are the places where the physical needs are the greatest.
For sure.
And I'm sure it's always been that way. It was that way in there. You look at the early church, the church in Acts, the church as it existed in these places where Paul and Peter wrote these epistles, the anonymous writer to the Hebrews. These were people that lived in hostile places. They didn't have a lot. The early church was not built on the wealthy. There were pockets of wealth in the church, men like Barnabas, women like Lydia, who were people of some means. But generally speaking, that was the exception rather than the rule.
Yeah.
And so in our context today, just the average church attender in an American church is wealthier than 99% of the rest of the world.
Yeah.
And they may consider themselves middle class or even lower middle class. And yet the reality is, here's the thing, from a physical standpoint, you've got it pretty good when you compare it to the lot of most of the people in the world.
Yeah.
There's some this is one of the advantages, as you know, of traveling on mission. Because, man, when you leave this country I never forget my first mission trip was to Honduras.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And, Tegucigalpa, the capital city, it's kind of a happening
Right.
place. But then you get outside. And we were ministering, we were trying to help a couple of church plants get established. This goes back to the early 1990s. And then the guy who was basically leading this trip, I was in seminary at the time, said, you see that mountain over there? Yeah, we're going up there tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
And bring your walking shoes.
Mm.
And man, we went over there. I've never seen that kind of poverty. I'd never seen that before. I mean, basically latrines cut into ruts running down the side of dirt roads. Yeah. Open latrines. Floors that were just earthen floors where people were cooking their food on the floor inside these shanties and lean-tos. And I'll never forget just the aromas and naked kids running around, without a stitch of clothing on.
Yeah.
That's a game changer in terms of helping to shape your Christian worldview. And the churches in those areas are the churches that tend to be the most dependent upon the Lord. And the Lord wants us to have a sense of dependency. I don't think the Lord is anti churches and anti-disciples who have a degree of wealth, even who are wealthy. There have been some marvelous philanthropical Christians who have made it in business and have done very, very well, or made it in their professional career, professional life. But these are people that have to learn how to keep things in their proper perspective, how to learn how to be generous, how to learn to see their wealth not as their own.
Right.
Otherwise, the Lord will cast an accusatory finger in our direction and basically say the same thing. You're running around
you're rich.
thinking you're rich when, in fact, you're not as rich as you think you are. There's a spiritual poverty in your life that you need to take note of.
Yeah.
So I think that is the overarching message of the church at Laodicea. And it fostered a sense of spiritual mediocrity, both at the individual level and at the church level, that the Lord was not pleased with.
Yeah. I was hesitating on the story, but you mentioned the missions and seeing poverty that way. We've always mentioned when we go to El Salvador, very similar circumstances, the people there typically don't have a 5-year plan. They kind of have a 5-minute plan. They're not really planning for college or the future. They're hoping to have a meal the next day, just to survive that day. But my daughter surprised me. She took me to a hockey game over the weekend, and I love hockey. This is not criticism. It was just an observation. So during one of the intermissions, I don't know if you've been before, if you're familiar, but they have something where basically you buy these little foam hockey pucks, and they'll put out little targets on the ice. So again, during the intermission, the skaters are all gone. And when they say go, 3, 2, 1, everybody throws their little pucks onto the ice. And if it lands on the target, you get a T-shirt or a free meal at whatever, whoever's sponsoring for the event or something. And I just remember sitting there watching, and they threw them, and I just saw all these pucks flying through the air and landing on. And I looked at my daughter, Sydney, and I said, can you imagine trying to explain this to someone in El Salvador when we go on mission, and just saying, well, no, basically you take money, and then you throw the money out into the middle of the ice, and then they scoop it all up and put it away. The concept of throwing money away. Now, again, I know you're trying to win a prize. It's a game, and again, I am not knocking any of it or anyone who's done that. But I just remember the visual of just all this money just going onto the ice, and then they scooped it all up and put it all back in the bucket.
Wild? Yeah,
and that's what we do. And then again, the richest country, we're blessed. I'm grateful for all of it. I don't mean to knock it, but just to put that in perspective of realizing what could we do, what could we do if we really just came together and pulled those and were able to affect for the kingdom.
Well, I think it's a good point, and I agree with what you just said. I'm not knocking it.
Yeah.
I am thankful that by God's grace, and it was only by God's grace, that this human life was born in the greatest country in the history of the world, in the United States. Freedom, liberty, entrepreneurship, wealth. We give God thanks for that. And yes, money's not the root of all evil.
Right.
It's not. It can be a root of all kinds of evil if it's not kept in the proper perspective. So I'm grateful. I think all of that in a mature believer should foster a sense of gratitude, of thanksgiving. It should really encourage our prayer life, not discourage it. But I'm telling you, for those of us like the church at Hillcrest, we have to remind ourselves to learn to be grateful, to stay focused on the Lord, to be people of prayer, to realize that it could be here one minute, gone the next, and that our ultimate sufficiency and security is found not in an account, but in the Lord Jesus Christ. That has to be encouraged, I think, in our context in ways that it doesn't always have to be in other contexts. The situation encourages it in other places. Our situation will tend to lead us the other direction in a position of weakness spiritually if we're not intentional about the way we live and about the spiritual disciplines.
Yeah, for sure. I wanted to ask you about one more about this church. It does wrap up with a promise to the overcomer, right? It does once again kind of give you that sense that there is an option to get through this. Jesus said, "To the one who conquers, I will grant him to sit with me on my throne, as I also conquered and sat down with my Father on his throne." Is that an encouragement to those in the church when there's not much else good said about them? Is that an opportunity for the individuals in that church to then turn it around, to repent? I mean, we don't see the call to repent like we see in other churches, but we see a promise to say, if you do come through this, if you conquer what I've told you, you'll be granted to sit with me. Do you think that's an encouragement to individuals within the church or the church as a whole?
I think so, both.
Okay.
I mean, obviously, churches are made up of individuals, so it always begins at the individual level. I'm glad you brought that up, because this, I think, was the one message that I really didn't say anything about the promise of Jesus to the victorious Christian. There was just too many other things to hit. And in other messages, I had to gloss over certain other things. But this was probably the only one. I think that this promise to the Nike Christian, the Nike, the overcomer, the conqueror, the promise here, I will grant him to sit with me on my throne as I also conquered and sat down with my Father on his throne. I think is a promise basically that points, again, as most of these promises do, it points to what theologians call the eschaton, the age to come, and it's a reference, I think, to the shared authority that Christ will grant with us. There's a real sense in which believers will rule together with Christ. Now, theologians, incidentally, with respect to that, because you might ask the question, well, where is that throne going to be?
Yeah.
And some theologians who are premillennial will say, well, that's a reference to most likely the millennial kingdom, where the redeemed will reign with Christ for that 1,000-year period, depending on if you interpret that literally or symbolically, that lengthy period of time. There will be a shared authority there. Or if you're more amillennial and you see the millennial kingdom really as a reference to more the new heaven and the new earth, then that's where that takes place, regardless, or maybe both. But regardless, it's a shared authority. Okay. We're given we're not going to be doing nothing in heaven. We're going to be talking more about that in the series that's coming. But we're not going to be floating around on clouds for the rest of eternity playing harps. Christians will be given responsibilities in the eternal kingdom, the new heaven and the new earth. We will reign together with Christ, as the song says, throughout eternity. We shall reign with him throughout eternity.
I don't want to interrupt you. If we're reigning, who are we reigning over then?
Well, in the millennial kingdom, because there's still an element of lostness in the millennial kingdom for those who embrace a premillennial view, and I know you do.
I do.
There will still be a degree of lostness in the millennial kingdom. I've got a message Jim, that's actually planned for this sermon series on heaven that's just about the millennium.
Okay.
Hopefully I won't have to cut it. Again, we've got some guests that are coming in over the summer. I've got two situations, and then I've got some time that I'm going to be out. And so I've got more to preach than probably I'm going to have time to preach it unless I decide to extend it a little bit further into around Labor Day and maybe a Sunday or two after Labor Day. I've got some deciding to do, but I've got a message that I may give that's just on the millennium. So there'll be a degree of lostness there. God's got some work that he's going to be doing in the millennial kingdom as it relates to the finality of Satan. And there will be, apparently, death in the millennial kingdom as well. So the millennium is not the new heaven and the new earth. So you can kind of see this reigning over kind of being more apropos in the millennium than in the new heaven and the new earth.
Yeah.
I think the reigning concept in the new heaven and the new earth has more to do with our service to the Lord Jesus Christ. And there will be various, I think, establishments of authority. So this is where the argument goes into what are we reigning over in the eternal kingdom of heaven. Not everybody will have the same responsibilities in heaven. And if you read Randy Alcorn's book on heaven, he basically says, you might end up being the mayor of Rome in the new heaven and the new earth, And he says it kind of tongue-in-cheek, but only kind of, And so there will be levels of authority in the new heaven and the new earth where some will be rewarded with greater authority, some with lesser authority in the eternal kingdom of heaven. So all of those things are, we have to kind of approach them in a speculative kind of way, but regardless, Christ is granting those of us who persist faithfully to the very end and overcome all of the difficulties of this life with a throne. And we'll have to wait and see the extreme details of what that's going to be like. But Christ will give us a degree of authority in the eternal kingdom without question.
That's pretty wild. Mm-hmm. So you've previewed the upcoming. Let me go back. Let's put a bow on this one. I'm going to make you summarize it. Mm-hmm. So all the letters, 7 churches. Take it as a whole. Give me a 1-sentence message to the churches. What's Jesus saying?
The most important thing Jesus expects from the church is faithfulness. Mm-hmm. Faithfulness and obedience. And the greater the faithfulness and the more consistent our obedience, the greater the reward. I think that is as good a summary statement, and I didn't know you were going to ask that question, so I'm just making it up. But I think that's as good a summary statement without also saying that Christ, there's always a cost to unfaithfulness. So maybe we can say it this way. Christ is most concerned about faithfulness from his church. The greater the faithfulness, the greater the reward. The more inconsistent our walk with Christ, the more likely and the higher the cost will be. Not a loss of salvation, but a loss of reward and a loss of authority when it matters most. That's a summary of what those 7 churches and the messages to those 7 churches, I think, are ultimately all about. God's looking for faithfulness from his people, and he rewards it, and he disciplines it when it's not there.
Good. Great job on these. I know I was excited going into them, but it always is a reminder when something kind of pokes you a little bit during the sermon, and to hear that maybe I need to pay more attention to this, or maybe this is a good reminder. And these aren't just letters to churches that don't exist anymore. These are letters to the churches, and we have ears. So
well, all of them but one had issues of some kind. And we had the opportunity to look at a church that had lost its love. There's a loveless church. There is a compromising church. There is a corrupted church. There is a mediocre or a lukewarm church, as we indicated Sunday, a complacent church. But there's also a faithful church.
Faithful church, yeah.
And that's the one that we want to hone in on and say, we want to be like that one.
Let's do that. Good word. Good word. Thank you for leading us through this series.
It's been a pleasure.
Definitely
I've enjoyed it.
Yeah, we're looking forward to the next one too. As Pastor Jim mentioned, we're going to be promoting it on Easter Sunday, so you get a little glimpse of what we're going to be talking about. But please, plan to join us 8 o'clock, 9:30, 11 at our 9 Mile campus on Easter Sunday. 9:30 and 11, 8 and 9:30.
At Spanish Trail?
At Spanish Trail.
Spanish Trail's 8 and 9:30.
Sorry about that. I know 8 and 9:30 at our Spanish Trail campus. And again, we have our Maundy Thursday service at Spanish Trail on Thursday, Good Friday service, 9 Mile on Friday, both of those at 6 o'clock. We just want you to come and get involved and come worship with us and say hey. So thank you again for watching, for your being faithful to always tuning into the locker room. Let us know how we can help you, how we can pray for you. And until next time, God bless you.